So the age-old debate, primes versus zooms.
Yes.
In the olden days, say 5 or 10 years ago, it was always the debate that the primes are always sharper. With technology and software ability, it's all changed. I think it's leveling off more than ever now. Do primes actually make much difference to a variable zoom?
Is there still a place for a prime in your life? Or a bunch of them? You're filming using 2 primes today?
Yes.
And what are they?
The 51.8 and the godly.
Godly, he hopes. He hopes.
51.2.
So in terms of primes, I've got 24, 35, 50, 85, right?
1.8s.
1.8s. Of those, oh yeah, sorry, because we're in the 1.2 club over here, so yeah, only the lowly 1.8s. Hardly ever use a 24, which we've already covered in another video. Hardly ever use a 35. Most commonly out of those use the 50 and the 85. And then within that range, I've got the 24 to 70 f2.8 and the godly 7200 f2.8. So, what have you got?
So I haven't got the 70 to 200. Instead, I went for the prime lenses like the 105 1.4.
Yep.
I've got, I'm testing out the 50 1.2.
Yep.
And I've got, that's it.
You've got the 20.
And I've got the 20 1.8.
Yeah.
So those three, and of course I've got the variable zoom, the 24 to 70 2.8, the workhorse.
Yeah, the workhorse. Bread and butter lens.
And we've got the 14 to 30. We can't forget that either.
But I'm just thinking of the range we're talking
about. Over the last, all the videos we compare with different lenses with each other, we're really struggling to find differences, aren't we now? When we crop in 100% or even 200%, it's becoming so leveled off.
Yeah, and particularly when the zooms, for instance, are wide open, they're still really sharp.
So I'm going to do a quick comparison between the 24 to 70 and the 50s. At all the same settings, this is at 100%. They look very similar. And maybe the prime lens here is a bit sharper if you look at this kind of bit here. But this is at 100%. And now switching to 1.8 on the 50 1.8. Okay, it's a bit softer here at 100%, which is to be expected. But it's still comparable. Remember, this is at 100%. And here's the 50 1.2 at 1.2. And again, it's similar. Of course, the 2.8 is sharper because it's at 2.8. If we switch to 2.8 on the 50 1.2, I would say that again the prime is a bit sharper here at 100%. If you look at this detail here.
Now I'm going to compare the same 70 to 200 but at 2.8 compared to 6.3, just to show that there isn't much difference in sharpness when you shoot at different apertures with this. So obviously we're shooting 2.8 to 6.3. The difference isn't that great, I don't think, which shows how great shooting at 2.8 is. Obviously you want it for the shallow depth of field, but you can comfortably shoot at 2.8 to let the light in, and it's still really sharp.
Using the 14 to 30 maximum ISO with a Z6, and the quality is really impressive. We were quite surprised by all this.
Which back in the days you said you'd have expected them to be softer at maximum apertures, so...
If you're looking over 100%, there's not going to be any difference.
No.
And when you stop down as well, they both stop down really well. So we're kind of, in a way, can we take sharpness out of the discussion of this debate?
I think so, effectively.
The 24 to 70 2.8, the workhorse of everybody, really. That's about £2,000, I think, now.
Okay.
Probably a bit more with inflation and everything else. So what primes can you get within that range? Would it add up to the same?
So you could get, if you really wanted to divide that range up, you'd probably go 24, nifty 50, 85, which is just past the end of that range, but not far off.
Yeah.
And the cost of those, probably £2,000 actually.
Yeah, it probably is about the same. But there are photographers that shoot in 35 and 85.
Yeah.
To cover that range.
Some go 24 and 50, some go 35 and 85, yeah.
So maybe you wouldn't even need to spend that much, depending on the f-stop you buy, of course.
Yeah.
But generally the 1.8s, you could equal them out. So that balances out the same then.
Of course, yeah. But convenience though, it's all right saying that the 24, 50 and the 85 replaced as a 24 to 70, but yeah, if you've got 3 different bodies and you can swap between them, or you've got time to swap lenses, does that outweigh the other perhaps benefits of a prime being the extra shallow depth of field and extra low light ability.
Some venues I can't use my primes because I don't have the space. Even a 50, it's just not practical
it's
to
not
use.
wide enough, yeah.
No. And then sometimes you've got something in the distance, you don't have time. It's always fast moving, with weddings especially. I don't have the time or space most of the time to do these kind of things. So a variable zoom, 24 to 70, starting out, that's all I used to use. However, then back in the day, my second lens I bought was a 51.4, and I loved it. I loved the look of it. It wasn't sharp at 1.4, but I loved the look. And that started a whole different trend for me, really. I started to think more artistically, more creatively. So that's the kind of the route it steers me on now. I've got the 105, the 51.2. So let's go to your 70 to 200,
My favourite lens.
your favourite lens.
Yeah. So it's 2.8, it's fast, it's sharp at f2.8. I think it has a really nice look to it, however you define that.
Yeah.
So there's no way I would swap this for a 105. For me, that range, this does it. Particularly when at those longer focal lengths, the shallow depth of field with the extra compression is as much as you need, I think, or much as you would want.
As you can see, they actually are more similar. Because of the 200mm, it brings the background even closer to me, but because it's at 2.8, it has a different look and a slightly different angle again. But as you can see, the bench, it's next to me there. It's a good look though, but the problem is you have to shoot so far away for a full-length shot. Again, the 70 to 200 is doing a really good job here. It looks very similar to the 85 actually, but again, the compression is quite a lot different.
Well, it depends who you're trying to please, because if you're general public, the 2.8 look at 200,
Yeah, it's fine.
it's great. They're happy. They're on about content, not about how shallow the depth
Yeah,
of
yeah,
field
yeah,
is.
yeah.
If you're thinking more artistically, if you're thinking about your pursuit as a photographer to get these more interesting shots, would a prime please that kind of desire more?
No, I don't think any client's going to say, you should have used a 105 1.4 there. Because I'm not happy with 104 at 2.8.
I've had
105 at 2.8.
I've had clients in the past saying they want the subject to pop out the picture, the foreground more.
So now you've got Lightroom masking.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da.
I actually took an event at a wedding. They're sitting down. I'll use the 51.2 and the 24 to 70. And with software, you can make them look similar. And so, what does that mean? You don't need the 51.2 anymore. Just use the 24 to 70.
Yeah. for the client.
In practical sense, maybe.
So what we're saying, we're getting these fancy primes. Those are for us.
Yeah.
Rather than the end client, aren't they?
Yeah. In our scenario.
I also shot with my 24 to 70, shooting at 50mm 2.8, and the ISO is 1250, and that's an incredible. So it's 1000 ISO higher. Obviously, you can see the background is much more in focus, and cropping into the sign, you can obviously see the lighting of love on something there, whereas on the 1.2 it's completely blurred. You have to think about the context. Will the couple want to see more in the background, or is it a distraction?
The ISO used to be quite bad back in the days of digital. Now, the Z systems, Z6, Z7 are so good.
Yeah.
Even high ISOs, you can't tell the difference. They look clean. Like with the example I've shown again, the 2470, I think it was a much higher ISO than the 1.2, obviously.
Yeah.
I've just whacked up the shutter speed. But the end result on the screen.
Yeah. And if there was a bit of noise in it, you can get rid of that with the software anyway. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I must admit, the last 2 or 3 music gigs I've done, 24-70 on one camera, 70 to 200 on the other, sorted. But I get it, yeah. If you're just going out for portrait shoot, you can put a prime on because you don't need the flexibility. You're governing the distance and framing and all the rest of it. So you put an 85 1.8 on there or 105 1.4 on it, and then you're fine because you know that you're not going to have to change the lens or do anything.
Yeah.
But in events, like music gigs that I'm more likely to do, or weddings like you are, things are moving around, fast changing, the distances are changing, subjects are changing. You just can't get away from the, can't beat the versatility of the zooms, I don't.
So in an outdoor environment, I would say I can't reproduce the 1.8 or below look with a 2.8 lens. Even though I could with the indoor shot, maybe with further distances behind the subject, you can create very airy and that dreamy look that a 2.8 lens would struggle to do.
Maybe a bit controversial, I think using a variable zoom is a bit lazy. Because it's so easy, you just stand still, you do this, you can zoom in and zoom out, you're just kind of static. Whereas with primes...
So what you're trying to say, you want to make your job harder because you feel like you've achieved something more.
I think it's more fun for me to use primes. Well, that's the beauty of the 51.2, is that I can get that even more dreamy, low shallow depth field without moving too much. Almost shot a whole wedding just using that 51.2 at 1.2, even group shots. They're risky, but I did it.
I hope you told them how special they were, how lucky they were.
Do you know what lens I'm using? They don't care. I think you can be so artistic with that as well. So again, it's levelled off. But for me, I'm steering more towards using primes for jobs because I like the challenge of it. I like the artistic.
So you're doing it for you?
I'm doing it for me.
Yeah, which is fine.
Which is valid in itself.
Of course
the
it is, yeah, but
pursuit.
as long as we know what
and
we're
other
doing.
photographers go, oh, that looks lovely.
And you don't want to be called lazy. Because I've got the Leica, which is a fixed focal length.
Yeah.
I really love using that. So that is pleasure for me, wandering around doing street photography. Well, having said all of that though, you can crop it loads because it's got a 47 megapixel sensor, so you're almost turning it into a zoom.
You know, if you're going to somehow measure your pleasure rating of using these lenses. So even though you said your primes, you enjoy using them and it's a challenge, but that's your favourite lens as well, that's a variable zoom.
Yeah.
So, just trying to summarise this, it comes to personal taste.
Yeah, but I do think, and you don't hear people talking about this very much, I do think there's a distinction between whether you're using it for yourself or for your client. What you can achieve that the client will be happy about is one thing, and I definitely think that the Trinity zooms always do that, as opposed to, which is just as valid, but it's in a different way, doing it for yourself.
So in a lot of situations, you might not be able to tell the difference. But what I'm doing now is shooting in a way to maximise the 1.2 goodness.
Yeah.
So I've looked at my last few weddings and compared it to the ones I've done before that. I'm shooting with this a lot more at 1.2, and it has a different character now, my kind of collection.
Well, good.
If you think about Canon, their Canon lens, is it the 28 to 70 f2? You've got both perfect worlds.
Everything there, yeah.
And it is about £3,500, but that's fine because it fits in so many lenses.
Yeah.
That's actually good value. So the technology in the future, will we see a 24 to 70 f2 as standard? Will we need the 1.8 then? No. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and let us know what you think.